The bathroom door had a heavy iron latch on the outside, a quirk of 1920s architecture that I used to hate. Now, my hand rested on the cold metal, trembling. Inside, my sister's husband and her maid of honor were laughing, the sound muffled by running water. They thought they were in paradise. They didn't know I had just turned their sanctuary into a prison cell, and I wasn't letting them out until the jury arrived. I stood there, frozen, my fingers still white-knuckled against the black iron. The metal was cool, indifferent to the heat rising in my face, indifferent to the fact that I had just detonated a nuclear bomb in the middle of a suburban hallway. My heart wasn't just beating. It was colliding with my ribs, a frantic, wet thumping that echoed in my ears louder than the plumbing. I thought I might throw up. I actually tasted bile, sharp and acidic, at the back of my throat. Inside, the water splashed. A woman's voice, Peyton's voice, murmured something soft and low. Then Tobias laughed again. It was a rich, comfortable sound. The sound of a man who thinks he has gotten away with everything. The sound of a man who believes he is the smartest person in the room. He had no idea I was standing 6 inches away, separated only by a panel of painted wood and a vintage locking mechanism that hadn't been used in 50 years. I couldn't move my hand. I kept expecting the handle to turn, for them to realize instantly that the door wouldn't open. I expected screaming. I expected chaos. But there was only the gentle sloshing of water and the low hum of their intimacy. They were relaxed. They were safe. They were in my sister's bathtub, surrounded by her lavender candles, soaking in her hot water, destroying her life with a casual cruelty that made my knees buckle. If I walked away now, I could unlock it. I could run downstairs, grab my bags, and drive away. I could pretend I never came. I could let them finish their affair and leave, and Audrey would never know. I thought about that for a second. The coward's way out. It would be so easy. It would save me from having to be the villain who ruins the birthday. But then I remembered the cake box downstairs. I remembered the text Audrey sent me this morning. Can't wait to see everyone. No. I tightened my grip on the latch until my skin pinched. I wasn't going anywhere. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I forced myself to step back from the door. The floorboards in the hallway were original to the house, creaky and demanding, so I had to move like a ghost. I placed one foot carefully behind the other, retreating toward the staircase, my eyes glued to that white door. The latch held. It looked so innocuous, just a small black bar in a slot, a $5 piece of hardware holding $1 million of devastation. The house was so still. It felt like a museum exhibit now, a pristine display of a happy marriage that didn't actually exist. I looked at the framed photos lining the hallway walls. There was Audrey and Tobias in Maui, sunburned and smiling. There was Audrey and Tobias at Christmas, wearing matching sweaters that she had knitted. There was the wedding photo, the big one in the silver frame. Peyton was in that photo too. She was standing right next to Audrey, holding her bouquet, looking at the camera with that bright, supportive smile she was famous for. I wanted to rip it off the wall and smash it. My hands twitched at my sides. I had to clench them into fists to stop myself from screaming. Audrey is the kind of person who saves spiders. I'm serious. If she finds a spider in the sink, she gets a cup and a piece of paper and carries it outside to the garden. She's a dental hygienist, which fits her perfectly because she spends her entire day making people comfortable while they are vulnerable and in pain. She remembers everyone's birthday. She remembers the names of her patients' dogs. She spent 3 months knitting a blanket for Peyton when Peyton was going through her insomnia phase last year, and this was how they repaid her. I leaned against the wall at the top of the stairs, trying to get oxygen into my lungs. The air felt thin. I had spent 3 weeks planning this day. 3 weeks of secret group chats, of coordinating schedules, of ordering the specific gluten-free appetizers that Tobias claimed were his favorite. I had lied to Audrey for 21 days straight to keep this a surprise. I told her I was busy with work. I told her I couldn't make it for lunch. I told her lies to make her happy. And upstairs, in that bathroom, they were telling her lies to make her look like a fool. I thought about the living room downstairs. I had left the bags of decorations on the sofa, streamers, confetti. A banner that said 33 and thriving. It felt like a punchline to a joke I didn't understand. I imagined the guests arriving in 4 hours. My mom with her famous potato salad, our cousins, the neighbors. They would walk in expecting a celebration. Instead, they were going to walk into a crime scene. Let me back up. I need to make sense of this, because 20 minutes ago, my biggest problem was keeping the frosting from melting in the car. I had woken up at 7 o'clock with the kind of manic energy that only comes from pulling off a complex logistical feat. The sun was shining. It was one of those crisp, bright mornings where everything feels possible. I had my coffee, double-checked my checklist, and loaded the car. The cake was a masterpiece. I had picked it up from the bakery at 9:30 sharp. It was a triple-layer chocolate cake with vanilla bean buttercream, Audrey's absolute favorite. The baker had warned me to drive like a grandmother because the piping was delicate. I buckled the box into the passenger seat like it was a newborn baby. I remember patting the cardboard lid and whispering, "Don't you dare slide." I felt so smug. Honestly, I did. I felt like the best sister in the world. Audrey had been down lately. She and Tobias were trying for a baby, and it hadn't happened yet. Every month there was a new cycle of hope and disappointment. She was stressed. She felt like her body was failing her. This party was supposed to be the antidote. It was supposed to remind her that she was loved, that she had a village, that her life was full and beautiful even without a positive pregnancy test. I had the key to their house in my pocket. I've had it for 2 years. I'm the designated plant waterer when they go on trips, and the emergency contact for the alarm company. I remember feeling the weight of the key ring in my pocket as I drove, thinking about how much trust that little piece of metal represented. The drive over was effortless. I was singing along to the radio, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. I was thinking about the look on Audrey's face when she walked through the door at 3 o'clock. She would cry. She always cried when she was happy. Tobias would hug her, spin her around, and tell her she was beautiful. That's the script I had in my head. That was the movie I was directing. I turned onto their street at 9:45. The neighborhood was quiet, lined with oak trees and sensible sedans. I was 15 minutes ahead of schedule. Perfect. That gave me extra time to set up the balloon arch before Peyton arrived to help. I saw the car. Before I saw the house. It was parked right in the middle of the driveway, not even pulled off to the side to make room for anyone else. A dark gray sedan with a small dent in the rear bumper. I hit the brakes instinctively, slowing the car to a crawl as I approached the house. My brain did a little stumble, a momentary glitch in processing. That was Peyton's car. I stopped my car on the street, idling by the curb, and just stared at the gray sedan. I checked the dashboard clock. 9:46. I frowned, tapping my fingers against the wheel, not to the music this time, but in irritation. Peyton wasn't supposed to be here until 2:30. We had a schedule. I had sent out a literal spreadsheet. Step 1, I arrive at 10. Step 2, set up the big items. Step 3, Peyton arrives at 2:30 with the ice and the flowers. Why was she here 4 hours early? My stomach gave a weird little lurch. Not fear exactly, just annoyance mixed with confusion. Peyton was type A. She was organized. She didn't just show up randomly. Maybe she got the times mixed up? I grabbed my phone and checked our text thread. No, right there in blue and white. See you at 2:30. She had written yesterday with a heart emoji. Maybe she wanted to surprise me? Maybe she wanted to help with the heavy lifting? That would be like her, I told myself. Peyton was always trying to be the hero, always trying to outdo everyone else's generosity. It was part of her best friend of the year brand. She probably wanted to be there when I walked in so she could say, "Surprise! I already did the balloons." I put the car in park and turned off the ignition. The silence of the car felt heavy suddenly. I looked at the cake box in the passenger seat. The joy I had felt 10 minutes ago was evaporating, replaced by a low-level buzzing of anxiety. I didn't like deviations from the plan. I didn't like surprises when I was supposed to be the one springing them. I climbed out of the car, balancing the cake box in one hand and 3 bags of decorations in the other. I walked up the driveway, passing Peyton's car. I glanced inside. Her purse was on the passenger seat. Her coffee travel mug was in the cup holder. It looked abandoned. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could, juggling the bags. I didn't want to startle her if she was on a ladder or something. I pushed the door open with my hip and stepped into the foyer. "Peyton!" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the empty space. It bounced off the hardwood floors and the high ceilings. There was no answer. The house was weirdly silent. Usually, if someone is home, there's a hum. The TV is on, or music is playing, or there's the sound of footsteps. But this silence was thick. It was heavy. It felt like the air in a room that hasn't been opened in years. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window undisturbed. "Hello?" I tried again, walking further into the living room. "Peyton? Did you start without me?" Nothing. I set the cake box down on the dining room table, handling it gently out of habit, even though my focus was entirely elsewhere. I dropped the bags of decorations on the sofa. The colorful streamers spilled out, looking garish and out of place in the quiet beige room. Where was she? Her car was outside. Her purse was in the car. She had to be here. Maybe she was in the backyard? I walked to the sliding glass door and looked out. The yard was empty. The patio furniture was covered. The grass was freshly mowed. A cold prickle started at the base of my neck. It wasn't logic yet. It was instinct. Something was wrong. Humans are animals, right? We have those lizard brain instincts that tell us when a predator is nearby or when the environment isn't safe. My lizard brain was screaming at me. Maybe she was hurt. Maybe she had fallen. "Peyton!" I yelled at this time, looking up at the ceiling. "Are you here?" Still nothing. Just the settling of the house. A creak in the floorboards. The hum of the refrigerator. I started to walk toward the kitchen. I needed to put the champagne in the fridge. That was the next step on the spreadsheet. Stick to the plan, I told myself. Just stick to the plan and everything will make sense. Maybe she went for a walk? Without her purse? That didn't make sense. I walked into the kitchen, and that's when the logic finally shattered. I stopped dead in my tracks. The kitchen was spotless, gleaming white counters and stainless steel appliances. Audrey kept a perfect house. But there, right in the middle of the island, was a disruption. A man's leather wallet, thick, worn brown leather, and next to it, a set of car keys with a distinct silver keychain shaped like a golf club. Tobias's keys. I stared at them like they were alien artifacts. My brain tried to process the visual data, but it kept coming up with error messages. Tobias was at work. He is a real estate agent. He had told Audrey, he had told me, that he had back-to-back property showings all day. He had a showing at 9, another at 10:30, and a walkthrough at noon. He wasn't supposed to be home until 1 to get changed before the party started. I walked over to the island and touched the keys. They were real, cold metal. I opened the wallet. His driver's license looked back at me. His credit cards were there. If his keys were here, and his wallet was here, then he was here. He couldn't drive to a showing without his car. He couldn't buy lunch without his wallet. So Tobias was home, and Peyton was home. "Tobias?" I said his name, but it came out as a whisper. My mind started racing, the overthinking engine kicking into overdrive. Maybe his car broke down? Maybe he got a ride with a client? But then why was Peyton's car here? Maybe they carpooled? Why would they carpool? Did they have a joint errand? Maybe something happened to the house? A leak? An emergency repair? I tried to invent a scenario where this was innocent. Maybe the pipes burst and Peyton came over to help him fix it because she knows about plumbing? No, that was stupid. Maybe they were planning a surprise for Audrey together? But why wouldn't they answer me? Why was the house so quiet? Then I heard it. It was faint, drifting down from the second floor. The sound of water running. Not a sink. It was the heavy, rushing sound of a bathtub being filled. And then, cutting through the silence of the kitchen, a laugh. It was Tobias's laugh, low and relaxed. And then a woman's voice answered him. It wasn't Audrey. Audrey was at work drilling cavities. I gripped the edge of the granite counter so hard my fingernails scraped against the stone. The innocent explanations dissolved. The broken car theory vanished. The surprise planning theory evaporated. There was only one theory left, and it was ugly, and it was upstairs, and it was taking a bath. My legs felt like they were made of concrete, heavy and useless, as I stood at the bottom of the staircase. The laws of physics seemed to have changed in the last 30 seconds. Gravity was pulling me down, trying to anchor me to the hardwood floor of the foyer, begging me not to go up there. From the top of the landing, the sound drifted down. It was undeniable now. The heavy, rhythmic sloshing of water in a porcelain tub. The low murmur of a conversation that wasn't about property taxes or grocery lists. I squeezed my eyes shut, my hand gripping the newel post until my knuckles turned white. My brain, that traitorous organ, was still trying to protect me. It was firing off desperate, illogical explanations like flares in the dark. Maybe the cat turned on the faucet? No, they don't have a cat. Maybe Tobias left the water running and the radio is on. But the radio doesn't laugh. That laugh. It floated down the stairs again, soft and throaty. It was Peyton. I knew that laugh. I had heard it at brunch 3 weeks ago when she told us about her boring weekend with her husband. I had heard it at my college graduation. I had heard it 1,000 times, but never like this. This was a private laugh. It was the sound of a woman who felt completely safe, completely adored, and completely at home. The nausea hit me in a wave. I pressed my free hand against my stomach, willing myself not to get sick on the rug Audrey had bought in Turkey. If I went up there, everything changed. As long as I stood here in the ignorance of the ground floor, my sister still had a happy marriage. She still had a loyal best friend. The baby she was praying for still had a stable future. But I couldn't stay here. The truth was a physical weight, pulling me upward. I had to know. I had to see it. I had to look the monster in the face. I took the first step. The old oak staircase groaned under my weight. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I waited for the voices to stop, for the sound of frantic scrambling, for the heavy footsteps of a guilty man rushing to the door. But nothing happened. The splashing continued. The low murmur of voices didn't even pause. They were so loud, so careless. They weren't even trying to be quiet. Why would they? Tobias thought Audrey was drilling teeth 10 miles away. Peyton knew I wasn't due for 4 hours. They thought they owned this time. They thought they owned this house. I took another step, then another. I moved on the edges of the steps where the wood was supported by the risers, trying to silence the creaks. I felt like a burglar in my own family's home. As I reached the halfway point, the smell hit me. Lavender. It wasn't just generic soap. It was the sharp, expensive scent of the French bath oil Audrey kept on the high shelf in the linen closet. The bottle cost $60. She saved it. She rationed it for nights when she was so stressed she couldn't sleep, or when the disappointment of another negative pregnancy test made her feel like her body was a hollow shell. That oil was her comfort. It was her sanctuary, and they were using it. My vision blurred for a second. The rage was sudden and hot, burning through the fear. They weren't just cheating, they were looting. They were stealing the small, sacred comforts of her life and using them to set the mood for their affair. I imagined Peyton pouring that oil, watching the golden liquid swirl into the water, knowing exactly what it meant to Audrey, and not caring, or worse, enjoying it. I reached the top of the landing. The bathroom door was ajar, just a crack, maybe 2 inches. Steam curled out into the hallway, carrying the scent of lavender and the humidity of betrayal. I crept toward the door. The hallway carpet dampened my footsteps, but the blood rushing in my ears was so loud I was terrified they could hear it. Thump, thump, thump. I reached the door frame. My hand hovered near the wood. I didn't want to touch it. I felt like if I touched it, I would catch whatever disease had infected them, but I had to look. I had to be sure. There was still that tiny, stupid part of my brain whispering, maybe it's a misunderstanding. I pushed the door, just half an inch. The hinges were silent. Audrey kept them oiled. The gap widened and the scene revealed itself in slices. First the steam, then the flickering light of candles. They had lit every single candle in the room. Pillars on the floor, votives on the counter, the 3-wick jar on the back of the toilet. The room was bathed in a soft, romantic amber glow. And there they were. They were in the oversized clawfoot tub. Tobias was leaning back against the porcelain, his eyes closed, a look of utter contentment on his face. Peyton was resting against him, her back to his chest, her head on his shoulder. Her wet hair was slicked back, dark against his skin. They looked married. That was the worst part. They didn't look like two people sneaking a dirty tryst in a motel. They looked like a couple who had been together for 20 years, unwinding after a long week. There was an ease to their bodies, a terrifying familiarity. A wine bottle sat on the floor next to the tub, a Pinot Noir. I recognized the label. It was from the case Gavin, Peyton's husband, had given Tobias for Christmas. 2 glasses were balanced precariously on the rim of the tub. One had a smudge of bright red lipstick on the rim. "Pass me the glass," Peyton murmured. "You've had enough," Tobias teased. His voice was warm, affectionate, the kind of voice he used to use with Audrey. "We need to save some energy." Peyton giggled and splashed water at him. "You're terrible." "I'm practical," he said, kissing the top of her wet head. "Besides, we have the house until 3. No rushing." I pulled back from the door, my breath hitching in my throat. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, staring wide-eyed at the family photos on the opposite side. No rushing. They had a timeline. They had discussed it. They had planned exactly how long they could play house in my sister's life before she came home to clean up their mess. I couldn't breathe. The air in the hallway felt too thick. I looked at the bathroom door again. It was an original door from the 1920s, solid wood, heavy, and it had that latch. When Audrey and Tobias bought the house, Audrey had laughed about it. "Who puts a latch on the outside of a bathroom?" she had asked. "Is it for locking unruly children in for bath time?" Tobias had joked about removing it, but they never got around to it. It was just painted over, a black iron bar against the white wood. My hand moved without my permission. It was like I was watching someone else's arm reach out. I needed to stop them. I needed to freeze this moment. If I just yelled, they would scramble out, dry off, hide the evidence. They would gaslight us. They would say they were just talking, that I was crazy, that I was imagining things. I needed to trap the truth inside that room. I stepped forward, silent as a shadow. I grabbed the small iron knob of the latch. My fingers were slippery with sweat. I held my breath. Inside, Tobias was saying something about a restaurant in Portland they should try. I lifted the bar. It made a tiny clink of metal on metal. I froze. "Did you hear that?" Peyton asked. "Hear what?" Tobias replied. "Probably the house settling. It's old." She hummed. I exhaled. I pushed the bar across the slide. It slotted into the catch with a satisfying final thud. I released the handle. It was done. The heavy oak door was now secured from the hallway. They were locked in, naked, vulnerable, and completely unaware that their timeline just got cut short. I backed away from the door, my heart rate spiking so high I felt dizzy. I turned and practically ran down the stairs, skipping the squeaky steps by memory, desperate to put distance between me and that door. I hit the bottom floor and stumbled into the living room. I felt like I had just committed a murder. My hands were shaking so violently I had to clasp them together to stop them from vibrating. I looked around the living room. The Happy Birthday Audrey banner hung across the fireplace. The balloons bobbed cheerfully in the corner, gold and pink, mocking me. The party favors I had spent 3 nights assembling were stacked neatly on the coffee table. What have I done? The panic set in. I had locked 2 people in a bathroom. That was false imprisonment, wasn't it? Could I go to jail? What was I thinking? I should have just left. I should have called Audrey from the car. But then I remembered the lipstick on the wine glass. I remembered Tobias kissing the top of her head. I couldn't just tell Audrey. If I called her and said, "Tobias is cheating," she wouldn't believe me. She would think I was mistaken. Tobias was a smooth talker. He was a salesman. He would talk his way out of it. He would say Peyton felt faint and he was helping her. He would say the door jammed. He would make me look like the unstable, jealous sister who ruined her birthday. I needed proof. I patted my pockets for my phone. It wasn't there. I spun around, frantic. Where was it? The kitchen. I had left it on the counter next to Tobias's wallet when I saw the keys. I ran to the kitchen. The phone was there, screen dark. I grabbed it like a lifeline. I thought about going back up and taking a video, but I couldn't. I physically couldn't make my legs go back up those stairs. And if I unlocked the door to film them, they might push past me. Tobias was a foot taller than me. He could just shove me aside and leave. No, I couldn't open that door. Not yet. Clunk. The sound came from upstairs. It was the sound of a door handle being turned and hitting the lock mechanism. Clunk, clunk. That's weird. Tobias's voice drifted down, muffled by the heavy wood but still audible in the silent house. I stood in the center of the kitchen, phone clutched to my chest. They knew. "It's stuck," Peyton said. Her voice sounded higher, tighter. Bang. Someone hit the door with the palm of their hand. "Hello?" Tobias called out. "Is anyone out there?" I bit my lips so hard I tasted iron. I couldn't answer. If I answered, the game began. The begging, the negotiating, the lies. I wasn't ready for that. I looked at the time on my phone. 10:05. Audrey was at work. She was 20 minutes away. Gavin... I didn't know where Gavin was. He was a firefighter. He worked 24-hour shifts. Was he on shift today? "Hello," Tobias shouted louder this time. The handle rattled violently. "The damn lock must have fallen." "How could it fall?" Peyton asked, panic creeping into her tone. "It's on the outside, Tobias." Silence. They were doing the math. If the lock was on the outside and the door was locked, someone was in the hallway. I looked at Audrey's contact info on my screen, her smiling face. If I made this call, I was blowing up her life. I was taking the happiest person I knew and breaking her heart into a million pieces. "Do it," a voice in my head whispered. "Better you break it now than let them live a lie for another 10 years. But I couldn't just tell her. I needed her to see it. I needed Gavin to see it. They needed to walk up those stairs, stand where I stood, and look through that crack in the door, or at least see them walk out of it in towels. I needed witnesses. The hard way meant no hearsay. It meant catching them red-handed with a jury of their peers standing in the hallway. I took a deep breath, unlocking my phone. My thumb hovered over the green button. Bang, bang, bang. "Hey, is someone there?" Tobias screamed. I pressed call. The phone rang. 1 ring, 2 rings. The sound was a digital trill that seemed to slice through the silence of the kitchen like a knife. My thumb hovered over the red end call button. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to hang up. If I hung up, I could go upstairs, unlock the door, and pretend this was a prank. I could say I heard a noise and got scared. I could lie. But then the timer on the screen clicked to 12 seconds, and Audrey picked up. "Hey, you're calling early." Her voice was bright, tinny through the speaker. I could hear background noise, the hum of the break room refrigerator, the low chatter of the other hygienists. "I'm just heating up my soup. Did you pick up the cake? Did the frosting survive the potholes?" I squeezed my eyes shut. She was talking about frosting. She was worried about buttercream while her husband was naked in a bathtub with her best friend. The disparity between her reality and mine made the room spin. I gripped the granite counter with my free hand, the stone biting into my palm. "Audrey," I said. My voice was a wreck. It came out strangled, like I was being choked. The chewing on the other end stopped instantly. "Nora, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "I need you to come home," I choked out, "right now." "What? Why? Did something happen to the house? Is the oven okay?" She went straight to the party. She thought the cake had fallen or the oven had exploded. She couldn't even conceive of the truth. Her brain didn't have a file folder for husband sleeping with best friend. "The house is fine," I said, forcing the words through a throat that felt like it was filled with broken glass. "But you need to come home. Immediately. Leave the soup, just get in the car." "Nora, you're scaring me. Are you hurt? Is Tobias hurt? I thought he was at a showing." The name hit me like a physical slap. "Tobias. He's here," I stammered. "Just come home, Audrey. Please, I can't explain it on the phone. You just have to be here." There was a pause. A long, terrifying silence where I could hear her breathing. I could practically see the gears turning in her head, cycling through car accidents, heart attacks, burglaries. "I'm leaving now," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all its warmth. "I'm 5 miles away. I'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hand trembling so badly I almost dropped it. One life destroyed. One to go. I didn't have Gavin's number. Why would I? He was Peyton's husband. We saw each other at barbecues and birthdays. We talked about sports and the weather. We weren't friends. We were just satellites orbiting the same 2 women. I frantically opened the browser on my phone. My fingers were clumsy, missing keys. I typed Station 42 Fire Department into the search bar. The results loaded agonizingly slow. I tapped the first number I saw. "Fire Department, non-emergency line?" A woman's voice answered. She sounded bored. "I need to speak to Gavin Miller," I said. I was pacing now, walking a tight circle around the kitchen island. "It's an emergency, a family emergency." "Hold, please." The hold music started. It was an upbeat, synthesized jazz tune. It was the most inappropriate soundtrack imaginable for the destruction of a marriage. I held the phone away from my ear, staring at the ceiling. Upstairs, the banging had stopped. That was worse. Silence meant they were plotting. Silence meant they were whispering, trying to figure out who was downstairs, trying to get their stories straight. "This is Miller." Gavin's voice was deep, professional. The voice of a man who pulls people out of burning cars for a living. "Gavin, it's Nora, Audrey's sister." "Nora?" He sounded confused. "Is everything okay? Is Peyton with you? She said she was going early to help set up." I leaned my hip against the counter because my legs were starting to give out. "Gavin, you need to come to Audrey's house, right now." "What happened? Is she hurt?" She's here," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "She's inside the house, with Tobias." "Okay." He dragged the word out. He wasn't getting it. "So, they're setting up for the party, right?" "No," I said. "Gavin, listen to me. They are locked in the upstairs bathroom, together." In the bathtub. The silence on the other end was absolute. It wasn't the confused silence Audrey had given me. It was a heavy, dark silence. The silence of a man who has just been punched in the gut and is trying to remember how to breathe. "Nora," he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Are you sure?" "I saw them," I whispered. "I locked the door from the outside. They don't know I've called you, but you need to see this. You need to see it yourself." I'm on my way." He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood in the hallway, trapped between the kitchen and the staircase. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of a bomb counting down. Then the whispering started upstairs. "It has to be Nora." Tobias's voice drifted down. He wasn't shouting anymore. He was hissing. "Audrey is at work. The only other person with a key is Nora." "Oh, God," Peyton moaned. "Oh, God, Tobias, if she saw us." "She didn't see anything," Tobias snapped. I could hear the toxic benevolence creeping in, that smooth, manipulative tone he used to manage situations. The door was closed. She probably just heard the water and locked it as a prank. She thinks I'm in here alone. Or maybe she thinks you're in here alone. She doesn't know we're together. "But the car," Peyton cried. "My car is in the driveway." "We'll say I picked you up because your car broke down," Tobias said. I could hear the desperation in his voice, the frantic construction of a lie. "We'll say you got grease on your dress and you were washing it off. We just need to get this door open before she comes upstairs." I covered my mouth with my hand. They were insane. They actually thought they could spin this. Grease on her dress? Washing it off in the bathtub with him? It was pathetic, but it terrified me because Tobias was charming. He was a realtor. He sold people dreams for a living. If I opened that door now, alone, he might actually be able to talk his way out of it. He would make me feel crazy. He would make me apologize for locking them in. "Hello?" Tobias shouted again, his voice pitching into a fake friendly register. "Nora? Is that you? Hey, funny joke, but we're actually stuck. The handle is jammed." I didn't answer. I just stared at the front door, willing it to open. Time is relative. Einstein said that, but he never stood in a hallway waiting for his sister to come home and find out her life was over. 1 minute felt like an hour. I checked my watch. 10:14. Audrey said 10 minutes. She should be here in 6. I paced the living room floor. I walked from the window to the fireplace and back again. The happy birthday banner seemed to be mocking me. I reached up and ripped it down. The tape tore with a sharp rip, taking a bit of paint with it. I crumpled the shiny paper letters into a ball and threw them behind the sofa. I couldn't look at them. What if I'm wrong? The overthinking engine revved up again. What if they weren't naked? What if they were just sitting? No. I saw the bare shoulders. I saw the intimacy. I saw the wine. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Mom. "On our way. Bringing the salad. Should be there by 2:45. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. I couldn't reply. I couldn't tell Mom to turn around. Not yet. I had to finish this. Upstairs, the rattling started again. Tobias was throwing his weight against the door. Thud. Thud. The old wood groaned, but the iron latch held. It was built in 1940, back when things were made to last, back when things were solid, unlike my sister's marriage. I went to the window and peeled back the curtain. The street was empty. The sun was shining on the manicured lawns. A neighbor was walking a golden retriever. It was all so normal. It was offensive how normal the world looked. I caught my reflection in the glass. I looked pale, my eyes wide and dark. I looked like a ghost haunting my own life. A car turned the corner. It was going too fast. Audrey's white SUV swerved into the driveway, nearly clipping Peyton's bumper. She didn't even park straight. She slammed the car into park and jumped out before the engine had fully died. I watched her run up the walk. She was still wearing her blue scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked so small. She looked terrified. I opened the front door before she could get her keys out. "Nora!" She breathlessly grabbed my arms, her eyes scanning my face, my body. "What happened? You sounded like someone died. Is it Mom?" "Come inside," I said. My voice was flat. I couldn't fake emotion anymore. I was empty. I pulled her into the foyer and shut the door. The house was silent again. The banging upstairs had stopped the moment they heard the car door slam. They knew. "Where is Tobias?" Audrey asked, looking around wildly. "You said he was here." "He is," I said. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. I looked at the floor. "Is he hurt? Nora, talk to me. Why are you acting like this?" "He's upstairs," I said. "In the bathroom." "Is he sick?" She started toward the stairs. "Tobias," she called out, her voice trembling with worry. "Honey." "Don't," I said, grabbing her wrist. "Wait. Wait for what?" She tried to pull away, her confusion turning to anger. "Let go of me, Nora. If he's sick—" "He's not sick," I said. "Just wait." We needed Gavin. I couldn't let her go up there alone. She needed the other half of the equation. The sound of a heavy diesel engine cut through the tension. A massive red pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Gavin didn't park in the driveway. He left the truck in the street, half blocking the mailbox. He walked up the path with long, heavy strides. He was wearing his station t-shirt and cargo pants. He didn't run like Audrey had. He walked with the grim determination of a man walking toward a burning building he knows he can't save. Audrey looked out the window. "Gavin?" She frowned, looking back at me. "Why is Gavin here? Nora, what is going on?" The front door opened. Gavin didn't knock. He stepped inside, filling the small entryway. His face was set in stone, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle feathered in his cheek. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at the stairs. "Where are they?" he asked. His voice was low, a rumble of thunder. Audrey looked between us. The fear on her face was changing. It wasn't the fear of an accident anymore. It was the fear of the unknown. She saw Gavin's face. She saw my face. And the pieces started to click together in a way she didn't want to accept. "They?" Audrey whispered. "Who is they?" Gavin looked at her then. His eyes were sad. Infinitely sad. "Peyton," he said. "Peyton is here, Audrey." "Peyton?" Audrey shook her head, a small, jerky motion. "No, Peyton is coming at 2:30. Her car is outside." She pointed to the door like that explained it. "But she's helping set up." "She's upstairs," I said softly. From the second floor, a voice called out. It was Tobias. "Audrey, is that you? Honey, thank God the door is stuck. We're trapped in here." "We." The word hung in the air. Audrey went pale. All the blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She looked at the ceiling. She looked at Gavin. And then she looked at me. "No," she whispered. Gavin moved past her. He started up the stairs, his heavy boots thudding against the wood. "Let's get this over with," he said. I took Audrey's hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "Come on," I said. "You need to see." We climbed the stairs in a silence that felt heavier than the house itself. Gavin led the way, his boots hitting the treads with a dull, rhythmic thud, thud, thud. Audrey followed him, moving like she was walking through water. Her hand trailed along the banister, gripping the wood so hard her knuckles were white, as if she needed the physical anchor to keep from floating away into the nightmare. I brought up the rear. My stomach was churning, acid rising in my throat. I watched my sister's back, her slumped shoulders, the way her ponytail swayed slightly with each step. I wanted to grab her. I wanted to pull her back down, throw her in the car, and drive her to Mexico. Anywhere but here. Anywhere but that hallway. But we kept moving. We were drawn to that door like moths to a bug zapper, knowing it was going to burn, but unable to stop. As we reached the landing, the sounds from inside the bathroom stopped. They had heard the boots. They knew Gavin was here. The sudden silence was worse than the banging. It was a guilty silence. It was the silence of two people hurriedly whispering a cover story, frantically pulling towels around wet bodies, scrubbing lipstick off teeth. Audrey stopped at the top of the stairs. She stared at the closed door. The steam was still seeping out from the crack at the bottom, curling around her ankles like a poisonous mist. She took a breath, and it shuddered in her chest, a ragged, broken sound. "This isn't real," she whispered. Tell me this is a prank, Nora. Please, tell me you hired actors. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. Gavin didn't stop. He walked straight to the door and placed his hand flat against the wood, right next to the iron latch. He didn't open it immediately. He just stood there, breathing deep, controlled breaths. In, out, in, out. He was a first responder. He was used to assessing the danger before entering the structure, but this time, the danger was his wife. "Tobias," Gavin said. His voice wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly level. "Open the door." From inside, a scramble. Then Tobias's voice pitching for casual but hitting desperate. "Gavin, is that you, buddy? Listen, this is crazy. The lock jammed. We're stuck. Just pop the latch for us, will you?" "We," Gavin repeated. He turned his head slightly to look at Audrey, his eyes full of a dark, simmering pity. "Who is we, Tobias?" Silence. "Come on, man," Tobias tried again, a nervous chuckle threading through his words. "It's me and Peyton. She felt sick. I was helping her get some water, and the door slammed. It's the wind or something." "Helping her get water," Gavin said, testing the words. "In the bathtub?" "We're not in the bathtub," Peyton cried out. Her voice was shrill, panic stripping away her usual composure. "We're just in the bathroom." "Gavin, please, it's hot in here. Just open the door." Audrey made a small, wounded noise. It sounded like a whimper. She brought both hands up to cover her mouth, her eyes wide and wet. She knew. The lie was so thin, so pathetic, it was almost insulting. "Open it," Gavin said to me. He stepped back. I moved forward. My hands were shaking again. I reached for the iron latch. This was it. The moment the world broke. I lifted the black iron bar. It felt heavier than before. I slid it back. Clack. The door didn't fly open. It swung inward slowly, pushed by the draft. The scene had changed, but the evidence remained. The candles had been hastily blown out, leaving trails of gray smoke to mix with the steam. The water in the tub was still rippling, disrupting the surface where they had just been. Tobias and Peyton were standing near the sink. They were wrapped in towels, Audrey's towels, the big, fluffy white ones she bought for guests. Tobias had a towel around his waist, his chest bare and glistening with water. Peyton had one wrapped under her arms, clutching it to her chest like a shield. Her hair was slicked back, wet and dark. Her mascara was smeared under one eye. The humidity in the room was suffocating. It smelled of lavender oil and extinguished wax and the sharp metallic tang of fear. Nobody moved. It was a tableau of guilt. Audrey stood in the doorway, paralyzed. She looked at the tub. The 2 wine glasses were still sitting on the rim, one empty, one half full. The lipstick stain on the glass was bright red, the same shade Peyton was wearing. "Happy birthday," Peyton whispered. It was a reflex, a stupid, panicked attempt to normalize the situation. She flinched as soon as the words left her mouth. Audrey didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just stared at her husband's bare chest, at the water dripping from his hair onto the bath mat she had picked out at Target 3 years ago. Tobias moved first. He stepped forward, hands raised, palms out. The salesman, the negotiator. "Okay," he said, exhaling a long breath. "Okay, I know how this looks. I know. But everyone needs to just take a second and breathe." He looked at Audrey, his eyes soft, pleading. "Audrey, honey, you're shaking. You look pale. Are you okay? You shouldn't be stressing yourself out like this. Remember what the doctor said about your cortisol levels?" My jaw dropped. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. He was pivoting to concern for her health while standing there half naked with her best friend. "Don't," Audrey whispered. "We didn't want to upset you," Tobias continued, his voice dripping with that sick, sweet poison. "That's why we were keeping our distance. Peyton has been going through a really hard time with Gavin." He glanced at Gavin, then quickly away. "And she needed a friend. She needed support. We were just talking. The bath." It was therapeutic for her anxiety. Therapeutic, Gavin repeated. He stepped into the bathroom. The room was small and Gavin was big. He took up all the oxygen. You were giving my wife therapeutic sex in a bathtub? Gavin, stop, Peyton cried, tears starting to stream down her face. It wasn't just sex. It's not like that. We have a connection. You've been so distant with all your shifts. I was lonely. Tobias understood. Oh, he understood, Gavin said. He looked at the wine bottle on the floor. Did he understand while drinking the wine I bought him? We were trying to protect you, Tobias said, looking at Audrey again. You've been so focused on the baby, Audrey. You've been obsessed. Every conversation is about ovulation and temperature checks. You pushed me away. I felt abandoned in my own marriage. Peyton and we found comfort in each other because we were both being neglected. The audacity was breathtaking. I felt the rage rising in my chest, hot and blinding. He was blaming her. He was standing there, dripping wet from cheating on her and telling her it was her fault because she wanted a family too much. Stop talking, Gavin said. His voice was a low growl. Just stop talking, Tobias. You're making me want to put you through that wall. Gavin turned to Peyton. She was shivering now, her teeth chattering. Whether it was from the cold or the fear, I didn't know. How long? Gavin asked. Peyton looked at the floor. It just started a few weeks ago. We didn't mean for it to... Don't lie to me, Gavin cut her off. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. The intensity of his stare was enough to crack bone. I'm looking at you, Peyton. I know when you're lying. You do that thing with your hands. She was wringing the edge of the towel. How long? Gavin asked again. Peyton looked at Tobias. Tobias shook his head slightly, a microscopic, "Don't tell him." 8 months, Peyton whispered. The words hung in the humid air like toxic spores. 8 months? Audrey's voice cracked. She finally stepped into the room. 8 months? I did the math instantly. 8 months ago was Christmas. 8 months ago was when we all went to the cabin together. 8 months ago was when Audrey started IVF treatments. You were together at Christmas? Audrey asked, her voice trembling. When you gave me that locket? When you toasted to our future? Peyton sobbed. Audrey, please. We tried to stop. We really did. But we fell in love. We couldn't help it. Love? Audrey made a sound that was half laugh, half choke. You call this love? Lying to my face every single day for nearly a year? Eating my food? Sleeping in my guest room? While you were sleeping with him? The air in the room shifted. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something jagged and dangerous. Audrey looked at the candles. She looked at the wine. She looked at the beautiful, romantic sanctuary they had built for themselves in her home. You made this nice, Audrey said. Her voice sounded strange, detached. You made it romantic, for her. Audrey, let's go downstairs, I said, reaching for her arm. Let's just leave. She shook me off. No, I'm not leaving yet. She walked over to the tub. Tobias flinched, stepping back as if he thought she might hit him. But she didn't look at him. She looked at the wine glasses. She picked up the one with the lipstick stain. She held it up to the light. Crystal, from her wedding registry. You used my glasses, she said. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, she hurled the glass against the tiled wall. Smash! The sound was explosive in the small room. Shards of crystal rained down into the tub. Audrey! Tobias yelled. She grabbed the other glass. Smash! You drank my wine, she screamed. It wasn't a question anymore. It was an expulsion of pain. In my house, on my birthday. She grabbed the wine bottle from the floor. It was still half full. Red wine sloshed inside. Audrey, stop, you're going to cut yourself, Peyton shrieked, clutching her towel. Audrey turned and threw the bottle. It didn't hit the wall. It hit the large mirror above the sink. Crash. The mirror spiderwebbed and then collapsed, heavy shards of glass crashing onto the countertop and the floor. The bottle exploded, spraying red wine everywhere, over the white tiles, over the sink, over Tobias's bare chest. It looked like a massacre. "Get out!" Audrey screamed. She was shaking, her hands curled into fists at her sides. "Get out of my bathroom! Get out of my house! Get out! Get out! Get out!" Gavin grabbed Tobias by the arm. "You hurt her," he said. "Move." Tobias looked at the broken glass, at the red wine dripping down the wall like blood, and then at his wife. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. He looked terrified. "I'm going," Tobias stammered. "I'm going." We moved downstairs in a procession that felt like a funeral for decency. Gavin marched Peyton down first, his hand gripping her elbow not with violence, but with a rigid, steer-her-away-from-me necessity. She was dressed now, having scrambled into her clothes in the steam-filled bedroom while we watched, but her hair was still wet, dripping dark spots onto her silk blouse. Tobias followed, buttoning his shirt with shaking hands. He wouldn't look at anyone. He kept his eyes on the floor, stepping over the threshold of the living room like he was afraid the floorboards might open up and swallow him whole. I stayed close to Audrey. She was vibrating. It wasn't shivering anymore. It was a high-frequency tremor of pure adrenaline. She still had wine splattered on her scrubs, little red droplets that looked like arterial spray against the blue fabric. The living room was exactly as I had left it. The balloons were still bobbing in the corner. The crumpled happy birthday banner was peeking out from behind the sofa. The sunlight was streaming in through the sheer curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a cheerful setting for a massacre. "Just go," Gavin said, pushing Peyton toward the front door. "Get in your car. Go to your mother's. Do not go to our house." "Gavin, please," Peyton sobbed. She reached for his hand, but he pulled it away like she was made of fire. "We need to talk about this. You can't just kick me out." "I'm not kicking you out," Gavin said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm removing you from the crime scene. We'll talk when I can look at you without seeing you in that bathtub." Tobias lingered near the kitchen island, his hand resting on the granite counter where his keys still sat. He looked at the cake box. He looked at the party favors. He seemed to be calculating the cost of what he had just lost. "Audrey," he started. His voice was rough, the smooth salesman veneer finally cracking. "Look, I know this looks bad. I know it's a shock, but maybe we needed this." I felt the blood boil in my veins. We needed this. Audrey turned slowly to face him. Her eyes were dry now. The tears had evaporated in the heat of her rage. "We needed this," she repeated. "I needed to find my husband naked with my best friend on my 33rd birthday? Is that what I needed, Tobias?" "No," Tobias said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. "I mean, we needed to break the stalemate. We've been unhappy, Audrey. You know we have. The stress of the fertility treatments, the pressure. We stopped being husband and wife. We became roommates who were trying to manufacture a baby." He took a step toward her, gaining confidence. The toxic benevolence was back. He was trying to frame his betrayal as a mercy killing for a dying marriage. "I did this because I was lonely," he said softly. "And because I think deep down you were lonely too. You just didn't want to admit it. I was trying to find a way to be happy so I could be better for you. Peyton..." She listened to me. She didn't judge me for being tired of the schedule of the doctors. "You're right," Audrey said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "I was focused on the baby. I was focused on building a family." "Exactly," Tobias nodded, thinking he had won a point. "And that's okay. But it pushed me away. So maybe this is a sign. Maybe we aren't meant to have kids. Maybe the universe is telling us to move on." Audrey laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound like glass breaking. "The universe," she said. She reached into the pocket of her scrub pants. "That's funny, Tobias, because I think the universe has a really sick sense of humor." She pulled out her hand. In her palm sat a small plastic stick with a purple cap. "I was going to tell everyone today," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I took this test this morning at the office. I took 3 more just to be sure. That's why I was so excited for the party. That's why I bought the sparkling cider for the toast." Tobias stared at her hand. He squinted, trying to make out the object. "I'm pregnant," Audrey said. The words hit the room like a physical shockwave. 6 weeks. The doctor confirmed the blood work an hour before Nora called me. The silence that followed was absolute. It sucked the air out of the room. I grabbed the back of the sofa to steady myself. Pregnant. After 2 years of trying. After thousands of dollars in treatments. After all the tears and the negative tests. She was finally pregnant. And the father was standing 5 feet away, smelling like another woman. Tobias's face went white, then gray. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. You're pregnant," Audrey repeated, "with your child. The child you said you wanted more than anything. The child you just said we weren't meant to have." Peyton let out a small, horrified gasp near the door. She covered her mouth with her hand. Even she realized the magnitude of the line they had crossed. "Oh my God," Tobias whispered. He looked at Audrey's stomach, then at her face. The realization washed over him. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had cheated on the mother of his child. He had blown up his family before it had even technically started. "Audrey," he choked out. He took a step forward, his eyes filling with tears. "Audrey, wait. This changes everything. We're having a baby? We can fix this. For the baby. We can go to counseling. I didn't know. If you had known, you would have waited a few more months to leave me?" Audrey asked. Her voice was ice. "You would have pretended to love me a little longer? No, I want this family. I want us." "You don't get us," Audrey said. "You chose her. You chose the bathtub. You chose the lies. You don't get the reward at the end." "Get out," Audrey said. She pointed to the door. "Audrey, please," Tobias begged, dropping to his knees. It was theatrical and pathetic. "Don't do this. Don't take my child away from me." "I'm not taking anything," she said. "You threw it away. You threw it away 8 months ago when you started sleeping with her. Get out of my house, Tobias. Get out before I call the police and tell them there's an intruder." Gavin stepped forward. He grabbed Tobias by the back of his shirt and hauled him to his feet. "She said get out," Gavin growled. He shoved Tobias toward the door. Peyton was already outside, weeping on the porch. Gavin pushed Tobias out after her. Tobias tried to turn back. "I'll call you. We need to talk about custody. That's my baby, too." Audrey walked to the door and slammed it in his face. She turned the deadbolt. Click. Then she slid the chain lock into place. Rattle. She leaned her forehead against the wood, breathing hard. We stood there in the foyer, listening to the muffled sounds of shouting outside, then the sound of Peyton's car starting, then Gavin's truck. Finally, the sound of Tobias's car peeling away, then silence. Audrey turned around. She looked at the cake on the dining table. The chocolate frosting had started to melt slightly in the heat of the afternoon sun. "Happy birthday to me," she whispered. "We can't stay here," I said. "Come to my place. I'll pack a bag for you." Audrey nodded mechanically. "I need my charger and my vitamins. They're upstairs." "I'll get them," I said quickly. "You don't have to go back up there." "No," she said, straightening her spine. "It's my house. I'm not afraid of my own house." She walked up the stairs, past the bathroom door, which was still wide open, displaying the wreckage of the mirror and the wine stains. She didn't look at it. She walked straight into the master bedroom. She grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Jeans, sweaters, underwear. She moved with a robotic efficiency. Then she stopped at the nightstand. Tobias's iPad was sitting there. He used it to read at night. He had left it behind in his panic. Audrey picked it up. She knew the passcode, 4004, their anniversary, April 4th. Don't, I warned. You don't need to see it. I need to know, she said. She unlocked it. Her fingers flew across the screen. She opened the Messages app. It was synced to his phone. She scrolled back. Look at this, she said, her voice hollow. She turned the screen toward me. It was a text from Tobias to Peyton, dated 2 days ago. Tobias. Just survive the weekend. Once the birthday nonsense is over, I'm talking to a lawyer on Monday. We can start looking for places in Portland next month. Peyton. I feel bad about the party. Should we really let her do all that? Tobias. Let her have her little moment. It'll be the last good memory she has for a while. Besides, if she's happy, she won't suspect anything. I felt sick. He knew, I whispered. He was planning to leave you on Monday. He called it birthday nonsense, Audrey said, staring at the screen. He let me plan this. He let me buy the food. He let me think we were happy, and he was just counting down the hours until he could blow it up. She tossed the iPad onto the bed. He didn't want the baby, she said. He only wanted the baby when he got caught. He wanted to trap me with guilt. She zipped up the bag. I'm done. Let's go. We walked out of the house 10 minutes later. I carried the cake box, simply because I didn't want to leave it there for the ants. It felt like carrying a coffin. Audrey locked the front door. She stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the flower beds she had planted in the spring. The petunias were wilting in the heat. I loved this house, she said softly. I thought we were going to grow old here. I thought we were going to mark heights on the doorframe. You still will, I said, putting my hand on her shoulder. Just somewhere else, somewhere better. Somewhere without ghosts, she corrected. She walked to my car and got in the passenger seat. As I backed out of the driveway, she didn't look back at the house. She looked forward, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. We drove past the happy birthday balloons tied to the mailbox. They bobbed in the wind, cheerful and oblivious. Nora, she asked as we turned onto the main road. Yeah? I'm keeping the baby, she said firmly. I don't care what he does. I don't care about the custody battle. This is my baby, and he's never going to hurt it like he hurt me. I know, I said. We've got you. You, me, Mom. We're the village. She took a deep breath and let it out. Okay, let's go home. Life is strange. You think the world ends when the bomb goes off, but the dust settles, and you realize you're still standing. Audrey is living in a 2-bedroom apartment about 10 minutes from my place. It's bright, filled with plants, and has absolutely 0 lavender candles. We painted the nursery a soft sage green last weekend. She's 18 weeks along now, and she's starting to show. We found out it's a girl. She's naming her Maya. The divorce is messy. Tobias tried to play the doting father card for exactly 2 weeks. He demanded 50-50 custody. He showed up to 1 ultrasound, but he spent the whole time texting. Then, the reality of child support payments hit him, and the reality that Peyton, who is currently living with him in a cramped rental, hates kids. Gavin served Peyton with divorce papers the day after the party. He was ruthless. He kept the house, the truck, and the dog. He's actually coming to Maya's baby shower next week. He and Audrey have bonded over the trauma. It's not romantic, just 2 survivors sitting in the rubble, comparing scars. The legal battle for the house was short. When Tobias's lawyer tried to argue that Audrey was unstable because she smashed a mirror, my lawyer, who is a shark, by the way, presented the text messages from the iPad proving premeditated abandonment and adultery. The judge was not impressed with Tobias. Audrey got the house in the settlement, and we sold it last week for $50,000 over asking. That money is going straight into Maya's college fund. Peyton tried to email Audrey once, a long, rambling letter about soulmates and forgiveness. Audrey didn't even read it. She printed it out, and we used it to start the fire in my grill when we made burgers. Yesterday, Audrey and I were assembling the crib. She was struggling with a screw, sweating, her hair in a messy bun. She looked tired, but she didn't look broken. "You know," she said, wiping her forehead, "I used to be terrified of doing this alone. I thought I needed him to be a whole person." "And now?" I asked. She looked at the half-assembled crib, then at her belly. She smiled, a real smile, not the fake one she wore for the last year of her marriage. "Now I realize I was alone the whole time," she said. "I was carrying the emotional weight of two people. Doing it by myself is actually lighter." She picked up the screwdriver. "Hand me that bolt. We've got a nursery to finish." If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.